Well, we begin the anime, which begins with a priest in the village of Haj finding two babies abandoned outside his church. The first boy is named Asta, and the second is Yuno. They grow up in a world where magic decides everything, and to his regret, Asta does not have it, while Yuno is considered a gift. Despite this, Asta does not lose heart and trains his body every day in the hope that one day he will also receive magic and become the king of magicians. A long time ago, when a threat in the form of a huge demon hung over humanity, the very first king of magicians stood up for them and single-handedly defeated the demon, whose head still lies in the village of Haj. And it is there that Asta spends his minds. A lot of time and effort to overcome his maximum, because he needs to somehow, without having magic, become stronger than Yuno. Now Yuno is strict and self-confident because he is considered the one who should bring happiness and wealth to the village in the future. But no one places hopes on Asta due to the lack of magic. But they were not always like this. Since childhood, Yuno was a crybaby, for whom Asta was constantly harnessed. One day, the priest asks Yuno to send an important letter to a neighboring village. On the way back, some man noticed his pendant, and therefore, without remorse, he took it from the child by force. Worried that Yuno did not come home for a long time, Asta went to look for him, thanks to which he managed to run at the most needed moment. He began to try to return Yuno's pendant, for which the man beat him over and over again, until eventually Asta's stubbornness took over. After this moment, Yuno completely changed, and if before he was a whiner, then thanks to Asta he became a self-confident guy who, like Asta, decides to become the king of magicians. From that moment on, they began to constantly train and compete, and although Asta had no chance against Yun's magical abilities, he tried to surpass him time after time. However, in order to have even a small chance of becoming the king of magicians, you need to get a grimoire, that is, a certain book that greatly increases magic spells. All teenagers receive them at the age of 15, and it is important to know that the grimoire itself chooses its owner. Despite the fact that Asta has no magical powers, he still wanted to try his luck and get a grimoire, because he really hoped that after this he would have magical powers. The presentation of grimoires happens once a year, and for all cities it is a big event. Asta and Yuno's entire adoptive family came to this ceremony, and they saw with their own eyes how Yuno received one of the rarest and most powerful grimoires, namely a 4-leaf clover, which absolutely all the residents were extremely surprised by, because it meant that Yuno was the chosen one. Asta could not boast of the same achievement because he did not receive any grimoire, which is why the others began to laugh at him. By the way, only the owner of the grimoire can use it, but even such rare grimoires cost a fortune on the black market, so Labucci wanted to take Yuno's grimoire away from him. Using chain magic, he shackles all the guys and calmly takes the book. But just like in childhood, Asta comes running to Yuno for help at the most necessary moment. However, since he does not have magic, Labucci simply beats him up. Despite such a difference in strength, Asta was not going to give up. Because of such stubbornness and self-confidence, Asta receives a grimoire, namely, a 5-leaf clover, with the help of which he defeats Labucci and returns Yuno's grimoire, after which he finally accepts Tasta as his rival for the title of the King of Magicians. In this world, a 3-leaf clover means hope, a 4-leaf clover, like Yuno's, means luck, but Asta's 5-leaf clover is devilish. However, despite the presence of a clover, Asta did not become a wizard, rather the opposite. Now he is an anti-wizard, because thanks to his sword from the grimoire, he is able to resist absolutely any spells and magic. Now, having received the grimoire, Asta, like Yuno, can try to become a magic knight. To do this, you need to pass magical tests, and since Asta does not have magic, the church is not particularly willing to let him go. They do not doubt Yuno's skills, but they are worried about Asta. However, wanting to become the king of magicians at all costs, Asta promises to become a magic knight and be sure to marry his sister Lily, and he does not care at all that he cannot do this by law. Having overcome the big road, the guys reach the capital, the scale of which surprised Asta greatly. The exam will be held at the stadium, which can only be entered by showing your grimoire, which again proves that people without magic simply cannot become a magic knight. The examiners did not find anything suspicious in Asta's devilish grimoire, which means he is admitted to the exam, before the start of which Asta immediately gets into trouble. Through carelessness, he runs into Yami, the captain of the Black Bull squad. The captains of all squads will be at this exam at once. They will decide who will go further and who will go home. It is quite logical that all the tests are aimed at demonstrating magical abilities, which Yun had no problems with, while Asta failed absolutely all the tests, for which the others began to laugh at him. He failed every task miserably, which is why there was a strong feeling that he would not pass the exam. His only hope was a battle. At the end of the exam, the guys split into pairs, after which they had to demonstrate their fighting skills. The first to go into battle was Yuno, who confirmed the title of a young talent and easily defeated his opponent, which all the captains admired. At the same time, Asta's opponent specially chose him in order to demonstrate his best qualities against his background and be guaranteed to get into a good squad. But Asta, using his devil sword, wins in an instant, which shocks absolutely everyone, except Yun, who already knew that Asta is incredibly strong. Finally, the decisive moment came when the captains had to choose candidates for themselves. At the moment Yun came out, all the captains without exception voted for, which means the choice of the squad is left to Yun, who decided to go to the Golden Dawn, becoming the first peasant to get into the squad of nobility. When it was Asta's turn, not a single captain wanted to take him, which is why Asta began to shout that he didn't care who, but at least someone took him into the squad, because in that case, he would definitely become the king of magicians. Such impudence and persistence was appreciated by Yami, who, to everyone's surprise, took him into his squad. And although the Black Bull's squad is considered the worst, Asta happily agrees to join it. This means that despite the fears of the church, both guys were able to pass the exam and become magic knights, with which they congratulate each other. After which they make a promise that one of them will definitely become the king of magicians. Using Fenrir's spatial magic, Asta, Yami, and Gordon move to the castle of the Black Bulls, which, due to the constant battles of the squad, are constantly destroyed, but thanks to regeneration, the castle is constantly restored. There, Asta meets his new comrades, namely psychos who looked like anyone but magic knights. However, one of them, named Magna, did not want to accept Asta so easily, and therefore challenges him to a duel because he believes that a person who does not have magic has no right to be here. Left with no choice, Asta goes out to the duel, where, using his sword, he literally reflects Magna's attack, which earns the squad's recognition and his new mantle. This means that from that moment on, he is a member of the Black Bull squad. Yun's situation was a little different. Everyone already recognized his incredible strength and gift, but Yun's origin did not give them peace. After all, in a squad of full nobility, there is no place for an ordinary poor man. But no one wanted to contradict their captain, and so they had to put up with Yun's presence. Nevertheless, so that their family would not worry, Asta and Yuno send them letters. Simple. Waking up the next day, Asta noticed that the residence was somehow different. But according to Magna, this is normal because the castle changes every day. After that, as a good elder, Magna gives Asta a tour. Be that as it may, Asta is not the only newcomer to the Black Bull. Noelle, a girl from a very aristocratic family, joined the squad with him. It would seem that the nobility forgot such things in the worst squad, but the whole thing is that Noelle does not know how to control her powers, so in her family, she is considered a shameful mistake and unworthy of life. She was generally forbidden to even approach the exam for a magic knight, but secretly she still achieved her goal, even though she didn't end up in the best place. Despite the fact that they were both newbies, Asta and Noelle began to quarrel, because even though Noelle couldn't control his power, and she still knew, which meant that by her logic, Asta wasn't fit to hold a candle to her, so she also refused to acknowledge him. At some point, she even wanted to hit him with magic, but since she couldn't control it, Magna got hit instead of Asta. Offended by the guys, Noelle said that she didn't need this squad at all, and throwing down her mantle, she left. For Asta, this mantle meant a lot, and therefore he couldn't understand why she parted with it so easily. Following her, he saw how Noelle was training hard to try to start controlling magic. Noticing him, Noelle finally lost control of her powers and therefore began to suffocate in her own magic. By the way, hers is quite strong, and therefore Asta was sent to save her, who cut her magic with his sword and saved Noelle. Thanks to the squad's action, she felt like her own person for the first time, after which she finally agreed to become a full member of the Black Bull squad. Some time passed, but all that Asta was assigned to do was housekeeping around the castle, which made him ask a logical question. What do magic knights do anyway? The answer to which came just in time. Yami said that he was taking Magna on an important mission, and this super important mission turned out to be a poker game, where the guys lost absolutely everything they had to an old man named Seek. But since they had known each other for a long time, Seek gave them a ride to the castle out of old friendship. However, there was also a real mission, and Asta and Noel were assigned it. But since they were newbies, Magna went to accompany them. Due to the fact that Asta does not have magic, and Noel cannot control it, they cannot fly on a broom, so Magna had to drag them on her broom. They were going to the village of Sochi, just where old Seek is the mayor. Their task was to hunt wild boars, which, unlike the usual ones, were fiery. And after a lot of time and attempts, the guys finally collected the required number of boars for Seek. It turns out that Magna deeply respects him. The thing is that in the past, Magna was, to put it mildly, not the most obedient guy, and therefore constantly arranged escapes to the village of Sochi, and each time Seek opposed him. With each such raid, Seek taught Magna something new, until at some point he told him that Magna had become strong enough to go to the exam of Magic Knights. As a result, Seek turned out to be the first to believe in Magna, for which he was incredibly grateful to him, and that is why he is so happy to bring these boars to Sochi. It so happened that they were not the only ones who wanted to visit the village, because just before their arrival, unknown magicians planned an attack. When the boys arrived, they discovered that the entire village was covered in magical smoke, and upon entering it, they would not be able to tell left from right. And how lucky they were that Asta was with them, who dispelled the magic with his sword, thanks to which they finally reached the epicenter of events, where they found out that these unknown magicians were about to destroy the village, and only Magna, who arrived in time, managed to save them. He saved everyone except Seek, who, fighting alone, was mortally wounded. The leader of this gang is called Grice, and at first he was not going to linger here, but due to the fact that Astas could resist their magic, he decided to talk to them. According to him, this village is located in an area where the inhabitants are not considered people, and therefore there can be no value for life. Of course, this is not the real reason for his visit, but with their words, they already angered Asta too much, so together with Magna he was forced to protect the inhabitants from a pile of crystals. At the same time, Noel felt that it was not right for a princess to die among commoners, because of which she was already going to run, but a little girl made her change her mind. And thanks to her, a new spell appeared in Noel's grimoire, which was able to protect everyone from crystals. This allowed Asta to concentrate on the attack, due to which he seriously wounded Grice. But Grice's counterattack turned out to be even more painful. Nevertheless, Asta did not stop his attempts to strike Grice, for which he beat him even harder. Seeing such an unwavering spirit in Asta, Magna also became very motivated, went out to fight, and together they managed to defeat Grice, after which Asta immediately passed out. After this, Magna took the attackers hostage, chaining them in fiery chains. But they did not expect that Grice would turn out to be a very ideological person, and therefore, in order not to give away any secrets, he kills himself and his assistants. And as it turns out later, the Order of the Golden Dawn is behind this attack, but we don't know yet what's going on. They reported everything to Yama, who said that the loss of Seek is terrible news. However, the last thing they can do is mourn him, because the old man would like to see them happy. However, nothing is known about the attackers. Their motives also remain unclear, and only one thing is clear. Judging by their behavior, the criminals were from Nady. It was not possible to find out more, but even so, for the work done, the King of Magicians rewards them with a star. This is a special reward for the achievement of the squad, and their number greatly increases the status. Therefore, the squads are constantly competing with each other. Now the Golden Dawn is in the lead. They have as many as 70 stars. The Black Bulls are breathing down their necks because again with the star received, Asta's squad is minus 30 stars. Anyway, it was time to get paid, which became a great reason for Asta to financially support his village. He was going to send all his savings there, but Vanessa persuaded him to spend at least something on himself, and so she, Asta, and Noel went shopping. The usual market, although huge and interesting, but Vanessa decided to show the guys something even more exciting, namely the black market. Since you can find anything on the black market, Vanessa wanted to get an artifact for Noel that can help control her powers. But while they were trying it, the guys stumble upon Seki, the same opponent of Asta from the exam, who immediately tries to pick them up. At this time, some thief steals a considerable amount of money from a grandmother, and so the Magic Knights immediately rushed after him. Asta on foot, but Seki on a bronze bike. Asta couldn't catch up with the magic cloud on 2 legs, so he decided to throw his sword at it, which dispersed the cloud and allowed Seki to move into the thief. The problem is that this thief poisoned Seki as a last resort, which is why he already sentenced himself to death. But when Seki was about to kick the bucket, Vanessa said that the poison was not fatal, and he would feel better very soon. Having returned the money to their grandmother, the guys went about their business. But they had no idea that in fact it was the King of Magicians, who, having reincarnated, wanted to personally see Asta's skills. And satisfied with what he saw, he also decided to look at Yun, who at that time was on his first mission. He, along with Mimosa and Klaus, were ordered to accompany Selim, the son of a very influential nobleman, and that very perfume. The guy from the exam, who was defeated by Yuna, which is why, by the way, he was not hired anywhere later. They wanted to give him good security, but Selim insisted that Yuna accompany him. With this action, he was going to show his friendliness towards Yuna, saying that he does not hold a grudge against him. On the contrary, he says that he really hopes that Yuna will one day become the King of Magicians. He diligently tried to seem friendly, at the moment even trying to find out about the homeland of the commoner. At this time, Klaus began to worry more and more about the setup, and just in time, they were attacked by bandits. Klaus immediately ordered Yuno to protect the carriage, but the bandits did not care. They threw all their forces into attacking Yuno. They almost succeeded, but at the last moment Yuno defeated them all. This interested Selim even more, because of which he wanted to meet the family that raised such a genius. For Yun, it was a reason to see his loved ones, so he didn't object. But Klaus and Mimosa were presented with a fait accompli, so they had no choice but to dine with Yun's family. They were served a table with a bunch of potato dishes. And even though Noble had never eaten anything like that before, Selim liked the food, so he began to praise Lily. Klaus began to ask him to hurry, but Selim didn't even think of leaving. On the contrary, he asked Lily to bring him more water, but before she left, he kindly gave her his jacket. It so happened that, while Lily went to get water, she was kidnapped, and it was obvious that she needed to be saved. But Klaus ordered Yun not to interfere in this, because their original mission was to accompany Selim, which meant that they had to finish their task right now. Of course, Yuna did not listen to him, so, ignoring the order, he went to look for Lily. On his way, he immediately meets one of the bandits, though he deals with him very quickly. He also had no problems with the second, and he could not do anything with the third either. The fourth turned out to be more cunning and began to threaten not Yuna with reprisals, but Lily, thereby limiting Yuna in his capabilities. However, Klaus came to his aid, who neutralized the last attacker in time. According to him, he suspected a setup on Selim's part from the very beginning, so with the help of Mimosa's magic they forced Selim to confess everything, and that is why they came to his aid. When everyone learned the truth, Selim showed his true self and began to wildly threaten Yuno. Then he even tried to attack them, but then Lily intervened, which means Selim and the 4 bandits were captured. You probably noticed that initially there was one more attacker, and the thing is that one of them was the reincarnated King of Magicians. By the way, his name is Julius. And as with the situation with Asta, Julius was also pleased with Yuno. Having finished their business, the guys returned to the church again, where this time Klaus behaved kindly and even tasted the signature potatoes of the Yun family. As a result, for this mission, the Golden Dawn also received a star, which greatly pleased their captain William, who, by the way, has high hopes for Yun's talent. And the same applies to Yulia, to whom the next task of clearing the density of the paranormal place was entrusted to the newcomers. Well, what will happen next? We will find out in the next part, the video of which will be released sometime tomorrow. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. And see you in the next video.